Welcome. I'm Debbie Rosas, and you are listening to Get In. It is a podcast about conversation about body and life. Now, I'm the founder and creator of the NIA technique, which has been doing the business of getting into people's bodies and lives since 1983. Movement based, body centered, and also tremendous nourishment for the brain. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. I'm honored to welcome a woman who has reshaped learning, how we understand learning. She is the author of the second edition of Brain Targeted Teaching Model, a framework for joyful learning and catch this leading. And I believe every educator must be a really powerful and strong leader. The process of learning is something that it touches deep into my heart. A child growing up with learning disabilities, still extremely dyslexic. I always laugh when I get off the elevator. I go, okay, do I go left? Do I go right? I just don't have that GPS, right, in my brain. So I've become very creative in what works for me and how I learn. Basically, I've had to wire my brain in a sense to work for me and to learn a little bit more about how I learn. Learning is deeply, deeply integrated us. We are coded to learn. We have primal instincts that teach us to stand up and walk without a book, without a personal trainer. There's some great wisdom in our body and our brain that we can tap into. I want to welcome Dr. Mariale Hardiman, professor at John Hopkins University and a true pioneer in the field of neuroeducation. Neuroeducation. Well, I'd like to think that all education has to do with our brain, but having learned in so many different situations with so many different kinds of educators and teachers, leaders, there's a difference between somebody that understands neuroeducation. Now, across decades of service as a teacher, a principal, a professor, a researcher, a consultant, author, we are in for a deep and wonderful conversation. And a conversation about weaving together sciences of how we learn and the art of teaching, right? The art of teaching. What is really interesting is that Marielle has founded the Neuroeducation Initiative, right? Creating change in the world is so important today. She helped birth the Mind, Brain, and Teaching programs at John Hopkins School of Education. Don't you love it? There's somebody that's really looking at how do we learn? How do we teach our youth? And, they say that the future is guided by the youth. She has inspired educators, including me, around the world. I have her first book. There's a brand new cover. And what I admire most about Marielle is she's a survivor. She has gone through tremendous healing on her own. And she brings soul to science. Yes, she has danced Nia, so she is a little familiar with movement arts. But her research shows us that arts, oh, and I love this, arts are not extra. Arts are essential for our memory, for meaning, for purpose and meaning. Imagine what's meaningful and important to you being included in learning. And in long term academic success. Now, I personally think that long term academic success is tied to living life in a body with success. Mariel reminds us that how we teach, how we teach, it matters just as much as what we teach. and that to honor the full spectrum of human intelligence, body, mind, emotion, spirit, and the uniqueness of every individual, their creative way, that we can not only educate, but we can transform people's lives. Welcome, Marielle. I am so glad we finally made this happen.
Thank you so much, Debbie. You know what? Your words inspired me just now. And, I love how you quote unquote get it. You know that in education we have to go beyond what we've learned and how we've learned ourselves in our grade school, high school, college, grad school programs. And neuroeducation, and for me, I have disseminated this through my framework, the brain targeted teaching model. So, the third book, the title you just said, just came out in April. And we expanded it a lot from the second book, from Corwin, and from the first book, was in 2003. The model itself has remained intact, but the research from neuro and cognitive sciences and the learning sciences more broadly has continued to grow and support this approach to teaching and learning. And it is an alternate approach. When I do sessions, professional development sessions for teachers, or when I teach courses, what I hear from teachers is, why didn't we get this information before?
Yeah.
I've been teaching for many years, for example, but I really never realized the importance of emotions to learning. I never realized that there's more than executive function skills, that kids have to be self-regulated and focused. I never knew about something that you're talking about called embodied cognition, and that is the idea that we don't just learn with our brains, but we learn with our bodies too. And, movement is just so important to learning. And that's why I just, as I thought about the holistic approach of NIA, the body, the mind, the soul, the spirit, it just feels so parallel to me of the brain targeted teaching model, which is really meant to bring in what we're learning, but how children are learning it, to understand that there are factors that will help information to stick, and we
Yeah.
want kids to learn. That's why, that information is coming kind of out of cognitive sciences. It's remarkable how much information now we know about learning, and of course, we don't know everything yet, but we're learning a lot all the time through research, through teacher practices about the best ways children learn, and we also know what's not working. Children do learn differently, and I think teachers are recognizing that. They're also recognizing the concept called plasticity. And that is just a fancy neuro word for the brain changes with experience. And it changes at any age. So we're constantly reshaping our brains as we learn and grow. And the thing that helps us reshape the brain, I think the most, is the combination of brain and body. Yeah, an example might be just talking to a parent just the other day, and she was describing her 8-year-old son's school experiences where he is, they've asked him to go on medicine because they say he has trouble concentrating and attention. And that's true for a lot of kids today, especially boys.
People.
Yeah,
People.
people.
I'm going to
Yeah,
say people today.
people today. Exactly. Exactly. So when I asked the mom, so what does he have the most trouble with? Well, the teacher says that he has trouble when he has to sit behind the desk and fill out worksheets. Well, it turns out that's a big part of his school day is sitting behind a desk filling
Oh,
out
God.
worksheets.
Yeah,
And then I see a brochure of the school advertising the school, and every picture is kids either behind a computer or sitting down with a paper and pencil and doing worksheets. So while some of that is obviously okay and important, the brain targeted teaching model is really about the integration of the mind and body, and um, we integrate that this embodied cognition I talked about through the arts, and so the whole brain targeted teaching model from beginning to end integrates the arts into instruction. So while a child is learning geography, for example, or math or language, they're also moving, and teachers are learning how to embed movement into instructional strategies so kids aren't sitting behind a desk the whole time.
absolutely.
And so they're embedding dance, they're embedding theater like tableau. Like here's an example. Children are studying a novel and the character of the novel feels trauma or feels joy. The teacher says to children, okay, now stand up and take a body pose called tableau, a frozen pose, and
Right.
show me how you think that character is feeling. So it turns out the teacher says the kids have much deeper understanding of the
Absolutely.
novel than if they just wrote a paragraph about the character. So, that's the kind of thing that we promote in arts integration is, the visual and performing arts as an integral part of what students do and not just something they do outside of school or in an art class, but they're doing it within instruction as well.
Well, that's a
And
perfect
it's powerful.
blend of, of really how do you integrate the arts and the creativity back into the structure? And as you said, you need both. Now, I'm interested to know here you are, you go to school to learn about learning and about teaching. At one point, did you sit back and you're listening to professors and you're getting in all this information and a light bulb goes off? I don't think this is the best way to teach. What was that moment for you? Because you bucked against what was being taught to you. And that's the beautiful thing about research. It always makes us turn the next page and look at something different.
The 90s were the decade of the brain, and a lot of money was being pumped into neuro and cognitive science research during that time. And popular media and research studies were coming out showing ways that we process information, ways that we retain information. And I started to see connections in what it was we were doing as in using thinking skills frameworks, dimensions of learning, for example, or multiple intelligences. And I thought, wow, there's such synergy here. We need something that teachers can grab onto and make this part of their teaching repertoire. So I started to go to the Learning in the Brain conferences and really doing a lot of reading myself and coursework. And I noticed that teachers were leaving the conference with a stack of books, like one book about
Right.
attention
More information.
and one book about emotion and one book about um, creativity. And a teacher looked at me and she said, "Isn't there one place that we can just get all this?" And I said, yes. So I decided to put all of that together into a teaching framework that became a step-by-step process for teachers to use this knowledge from how important emotions are to learning to how important the physical environment, novelty, for example, is. The idea that multitasking doesn't exist and that make sure that you're not asking kids to do 2 things at once because they're not gonna retain the information. They're gonna have to task switch. Looking at some of the neuromyths out there, like teachers believing that the brain is fixed or we only use 10% of our brain. If you believe that, then are you going to work hard to try to get children to learn when they're facing difficulties? You might give up on them and say, well, this child can learn this, but this one not gonna.
Right.
We work on some of my research is on teacher efficacy beliefs, and that is when teachers know and learn how the brain thinks and learns, and they understand the concept of plasticity, that is, the brain changes. It empowers them. They understand that, wow, I can reach every child. Every child can learn, but in different ways. And you described that so well in the
Yeah.
beginning of the conversation, and children themselves, when they learn about the brain, they become empowered. There's a lot of research about that as well, that children, when they understand more about how their brain works, it empowers them to really become better learners,
Yeah.
frankly, and to persist when they're having trouble. Seeing
There's
failure as
a, um, a gentleman, his name Aaron Anastovsky, and he had a methodology called salutogenesis, and the whole, model is really based on when you're working with somebody, and this is in the medical, in the medical field. 3 things. Do they understand what you're even talking about? Because that creates a quality of relaxation and also a leaning in, an interest. Can they manage what you're asking them to do? Again, then they feel safe. And does it have meaning? Do they, what's the meaning? Do they get the meaning, the importance of what they're going to do in their life? In other words, does it have purpose? Does it have that emotional connection? And I love what you're talking about in terms of the teachers. And you can see it when teachers go to these conferences. I believe most teachers want to be highly successful. They are deeply committed to their students and they want to help every student. And so their education, the hours that they put into educating themselves, they don't get paid back for that. But yet, there's something about teachers and something about healers and something about educators in general, like myself. We have this insatiable desire to help, right? We want to help. That falls into the healing category for me, whether you're helping a child learn that they can learn or helping a teacher giving him or her the tools so that they can break into the resistance, the perception that somebody can't learn. And I love that you're talking about beliefs. You know this. The research is if I believe that child is not going to learn, chances are they won't. If I believe there's the potential, they will. And I love the way your teaching model really looks at that. It kind of takes down the walls, I guess, or the container and opens it up to potential and possibility and meaning for the teacher and the student.
Yep. Exactly. I mean, you're exactly right. What research shows that teacher efficacy beliefs, their beliefs in whether or not education broadly, which is general efficacy, or personal, do I have the skills, um, correlates the strongest with student achievement more than anything else.
Yeah.
So it is really important, and that's earlier when you were talking about the different components of really life within the structure that you described, you were describing the brain targeted teaching model because all of that is contained in it. It's the environment, the physical and emotional environment. It's letting children know and understand upfront what they're learning and why they're learning it. and then giving them techniques, including the arts, that help them actually acquire the information, to learn it, to make it stick, because you're not going to be creative about something that you don't know, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, we want to go to the next level, which I call Brain Target 5, and that is using the knowledge you have and applying it in a real world situation with creative thinking and problem solving. And that's where we kind of go with the model, that we move students toward that. And that's empowering when students can think creatively
Yeah.
and when they can apply their knowledge in new ways. That's what the world demands
Yeah.
of our technological society today, is just to be able to problem solve and to rely on the knowledge that you know to be able to create new knowledge. And so that, that's where we go with the model, and that's how we train the teachers. And I have to tell you, I so agree with you. Educators just are so amazing to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And I see and hear from so many of them just their first of all, their dedication, as
Yes.
you noted, but also just really the wonderful and creative ways that they engage students on a personal level and, as a group. The other thing, though, that makes me a little sad is that so many of the teachers, after they learn the model and they learn how to do the arts integration, they say to me, "Can you just tell the principal how to do this? Because they don't
Exactly.
understand what I'm doing."
Exactly.
Yeah, which is why in this new edition, I really focus on leadership as well as teaching. And I'm going to say this book also goes beyond education, because what found out as I was teaching my courses at Hopkins is that a lot of my students were not in the field of education, but they were corporate trainers. They were people who were doing strategic planning for corporations, and they were using the model in that way. So this third book actually goes beyond education. Obviously, it's focused on educators, but it includes a lot of focus on how this really looks in the workplace as well as in the classroom. And there's a chapter for parents, how it works in the home, how you can support your child's learning in the home as well.
It's so timely that we're talking about this because 'cause I'm working on a project and, I've really been looking at, the ecology of leadership. You talk about environment. What is, how do I sustain this healthy environment to be a leader, not a top-down leader, but a leader of relationship, a leader of connection, a leader of um, encouraging people to think and having fun with thinking. I can remember as a child being ridiculed. Well, she's not thinking enough. And it's like, well, what does that effing mean to think, right? She's not paying attention. Well, I was just in my imagination. My attention was somewhere else. But encouraging children to value the gift of thinking, to be empowered to use their way of thinking, which hopefully is outside of the box so we get new intelligence, new wisdom, and to find creative ways at which you have to bring the element of play, which is our primal way that we learn, to bring that into the concept of developing, as you said, thinking or strategic thinking. And
Well, that's
leadership for parents, absolutely.
yeah.
Leadership for a CEO, absolutely. Because, the world is different today. People are sharing their emotions. They want room to bring their whole self into the workplace. They want to be able to express themselves, their authenticity. Therefore, the structure of the home and the structure of the workplace, the structure of leadership, that role model has to change.
That's exactly right, and again, that's why I put, first of all, joyful in the title because it's gotta be fun. I mean,
Yeah,
learning should be joyful. Um, Learning and leading, as we talked about before, the importance of leadership. I did a study not too long ago, a couple of years ago, for the National Science Foundation, looking at a creativity assessment and piloting this assessment with teachers. And I had teachers from independent schools, public schools, charter schools, giving to their children an assessment. We called it an activity because I didn't want kids to get upset that they were taking
that's a
the test.
good see, words matter. Words
Words
matter.
matter. Words matter. Yep.
Yeah.
So instead of being an assessment, which it really was,
Uh-huh.
I renamed it activity. And so it called for divergent thinking.
Yeah.
Now, for those out there who aren't in the education speak, there's convergent thinking, which is there is one answer. And then there's divergent thinking, which is there's multiple answers, right?
My favorite.
So Mo most of research will show that most of what happens in schools today is convergent thinking. Kids are asked to find the answer. And of course, that's the basis of our standardized testing program, right? You pick the right answer. So during this study, I interviewed all the teachers. How did the kids do with questions? There were 9 of them that were all divergent thinking. And pretty much every teacher said to me, first of all, the kids were surprised that there wasn't a right answer. And I had to reassure them a lot that, yes, you can really be creative. You can think outside of the box
Yeah.
here. And w I want you to write as much as you can think of, and there's no right answer. And the next thing they wanna know is, "Well, how is this gonna show up in my grade?" Well, it's not. This is an activity. It's an activity to get you to think differently. And then the teacher said to me, once the kids got that, they understood it, they had so much fun just
Yeah.
coming up with creative ways. So the bottom line that most teachers told me was, we would love to teach this way all the time, and we'd love to do arts integration all the time, and we'd love to do your model. The only thing that's holding us back is that we have a curriculum that we're told to teach to fidelity,
Yeah.
and it's very structured. Number 2, we are accountable for student achievement through standardized testing,
Yeah.
and schools are punished or rewarded based on those tests.
Yeah.
So I think I want to go back to the concept of leadership and say leadership needs to be at the policy level too.
Absolutely.
Those who are making education policy need to understand that education is not just the product that's produced on a standardized test, or it's not just an SAT score that gets you into whatever college you want. It's the experiences that you have in schools, what you take with you. I don't remember any tests or quizzes I ever took in school, but I remember the plays, right? I remember the projects.
Exactly.
You remember the things
That you
that are
got your
fun.
hands in, that your whole
Yeah,
body was in. Yeah.
that your whole body was in. And And that's true learning. So many kids will come back to us, once we started arts integration when I was principal of the school in Baltimore, and they would say, "Oh, I remember every bit of the content of heredity, for example, because we did that through an arts integration model. And so I remember all that content because we made things, we did things. So, it's not rocket science. It's just common sense, frankly.
It's once something you know this, once something has been established as this is it, this is how we do it, it can take a long time to break it down and to demolish and start fresh. And I totally believe that the entire education system needs to be knocked down, the soil refertilized, and get everybody back into that place of holistic, of understanding that a child is first and foremost very much guided by their first three chakras energetically: safety, root; second chakra, creativity, sensuality, but creativity for a child; third chakra, will center. This is me. The development of the higher parts of self come later. But those first three parts are so critical for a child to bring themselves to the table, to bring themselves versus having all of this information put on top of them as stuff they need to learn to pass a test. I never do well on tests because I diverge and think all the time. All the time. I'm in another anatomy course right now and I laugh at myself. I call myself a slow learner. I have to watch something 3 or 4 times, right? And then I go, okay, let's take the test. And then I laugh. Every answer I go, well, it could be this and it could be that. What if they had cancer? What if they had diabetes? What if I'm just like all over the place? Um, and to find what everybody thinks is the most logical is certainly a skill. That's why I'm not good at Jeopardy. If you ever watch that show, it's like, I go, how does their brain work like that? Right. But I think you really hit the nail on the head. We've got to get to the source of who has the leadership control, and that has to shift. And how sad it is when the curriculum is so rigid that there's no room for the one constant where they know is the constant, which is change. And particularly when there's new research about neuroscience and learning constantly coming in, which means the curriculum has to be much more of a fluid structure that allows for change and for the curriculum itself to learn and to adapt to the needs of the culture and the children that are growing up with AI and technology, and they're seeing creativity all over the place on TikTok. They want to be a part of the world.
Yeah. No question. Empowerment of teachers is something that I would love to see everywhere. And
Yeah.
I do see teachers who say, I'm really empowered to do what I need to do to make my children creative problem solvers. And it's lovely to hear that. And I wish I heard it from every teacher. I wish everybody said, yes, I am empowered to take this curriculum and massage it for the needs of my students to make them creative problem solvers and not to just be on, it's Tuesday, this is the page I have to be on, right? So, but there's a lot of research that shows that teachers tend to teach the way they were taught.
Exactly.
So let's
Yep.
go back to higher education too. And, a lot of people who have come into my courses or my professional development sessions are higher education teachers, and they understand that they're producing people who will go out into the world and need to be creative, and they themselves then need to be able to teach in a way so that people aren't just modeling what they just came out of through 4 years of education, graduate school or undergrad. Yeah.
And, it's such a different relationship in teaching when it's top down. I'm gonna tell you what to do, and you're gonna do it, then I'm gonna test you. There's no intimacy there. There really is no relationship between the leader, the teacher, and the child. And so the emotional comfort that is so tied to personal growth as well, when you have a teacher, for example, that doesn't have healthy relationships, that isn't comfortable with intimacy, and yet we're saying, look, you need to do this with your students. You need to be joyful with them. You need to be silly with them. You need to, color outside of the box with them. The way that we have control is through engagement, not by pulling somebody along with a rope. And I would imagine, and you may have experienced with teachers with this, that there's some people that say, this is going to be a real challenge for me.
Yep. And you mentioned relationship. That is just so critical too. Whether you are in kindergarten or you're in grad school, if you think that the instructor does not like you or does not care about you, it's amazingly different than when you believe that you're cared for, that you're part of a community of learners. When I was a school principal, a teacher was sent to my school, and she had really a difficult time um, with the management of the class. I mean, she was sending discipline referrals to the office all day long. So one day I just took my laptop and I sat in the back of the classroom and I sort of watched what was going on, and I could see she was having a tough time. But I also noticed that when the kids came into the classroom, she had her back to the kids. There was no order in how they came in, and she was writing on the chalkboard. So, again, it was a difficult she had a difficult time, um, with the kids just attending to her and wanting to learn. So I thought, "Hey, what's going on with this class?" So I thought, "Let me just follow this class to the next classroom." So I did, and that teacher had the students they were all lined up nicely outside of her room, and for every child that walked in the door, she said something to them. "You did a great job on your quiz. Oh, I saw your soccer game. You played really well."
Yeah.
Or, "How's your mom? I know
Relationship.
she was having." Oh, every child, there was something, or maybe it was a fist bump, or somebody wanted a hug. Every child, she had some connection. During her class, she had the kids in the palm of her hand. They were engaged. They She had wonderful lessons, and I thought, "Oh, man, it's not the kids."
No.
It's that personal connection, which is why when I wrote that first book, and it's even grown through the other books, um, I really emphasized that personal connection. And actually, when I was writing the second book, I actually found research that when a teacher greets kids at the door, the achievement level of the kids is exponentially better than when they don't. So there's research to this. I mean, I
Well,
saw it.
I know that when I wake up in the morning, if my husband says, "Hi, honey, good morning," my whole day's different. It's like, it's amazing. And I think it goes back to that human need to connect, the human need to be in relationship. And that 5-year-old that wants to be loved, wants to be included, wants to be liked, it does not go away just because you're in a PhD program, right?
That's right.
It's still there. And the 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 intimacy that is created when one creates an environment of, I am interested in you, I see you, I'm acknowledging you. I recognize and acknowledge you, and, I pause for that moment and make a personal connection. It's got to be huge for a child. Huge.
It really is, and, you know, as you mentioned, it doesn't matter the age. It can be anywhere. I was giving, a workshop to professors at a university, and I talk about sometimes educators don't realize that they're doing something called downshifting, which is a metaphor that we use when a child is distraught. And when you're distraught for whatever reason, it's really hard to concentrate and it's hard to learn. And so I talk to teachers about, sometimes as a teacher, you don't understand that you're downshifting a child. So an exercise that I do is ask my audience, think about a time when you felt downshifted. What happened? How did it feel? And I get so many stories.
It feels
One, for
awful.
example,
It feels awful.
well, it does.
Yeah.
One woman, she was in her 70s and she talked about what happened in first grade when the teacher said, you're not really very good at math. You're probably not going to be very good at math. She said, after that, I didn't pay attention in any math class. I avoided math for the rest of my life. So just one remark.
Yeah.
And, somebody afterwards, this was on Zoom, and he actually typed this into the Zoom chat. He said, "You know, I realize I downshifted a student in my course." He said, "The student was very active and really always participated, and all of a sudden he stopped." And he sat in the back of the room and he said, "I didn't know really what happened and I didn't really reach out to him." He said, "But after the course was over, he came to my office and he said, 'I wanted you to know what happened.'" He said, the student said, I said something and you kind of made fun of it. You sort of it really made me feel a little bit demeaned. I was embarrassed." And he said, "You might have thought it was funny, but it wasn't to me. It made me feel," and he said, "I just couldn't participate in your class after that." So
Wow.
I often tell teachers, sometimes it's unintentional, but we have to be really aware.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about how language matters.
Yeah.
We just have to be really aware that, especially if you're a leader or you're a teacher or a professor, that how you relate to those that you're teaching or leading is important.
Yeah, and this brings me to, talk about words. The word trauma is used like way different than I remember it. In my days, trauma was predominantly physical abuse or real serious, conscious emotional abuse of someone, but it was big. And, you talk about this woman in the audience who had that experience, or this young man, and had a traumatizing experience where he couldn't participate in the class, or she never went on to study math, and she could have been a brilliant math scientist. Um, how do you work with that and teachers just to have the perception anything that comes out of your mouth, any gesture, anything you do to someone can feel traumatizing.
Yeah. I think the first thing is awareness, and that's when uh, in the brain targeted teaching model there are six, and the first is the emotional climate, and so we talk about that first, and it permeates everything else we talk about. And really, it's be aware, understand that again your language matters. If a child fails at something, make sure that they see failure as an opportunity for learning and not as, "I'm not good at that, I can't do it." So create a culture in which it's okay to fail, it's okay to make a mistake,
Yeah,
and be careful of not being sarcastic. Sometimes you might think it's funny, but it may not be funny to the child.
right.
And then if you do see that something has happened, try to repair your relationship, and they can be repaired, you know? Maybe you notice that the student has kind of stopped participating or is acting differently, you know? They make an effort to find out, you know, "How are you? Is everything okay? Is there anything I can help with?" So, just knowing that, you know, you're in a position to really, um, empower a child or, um, have a child be downshifted
Yeah.
is right within your power as an educator and as a leader. You know, this happens even in the workplace. I can tell you, I've experienced it myself.
I bet.
Er, I would contribute something and, you know, no, it wasn't acknowledged, and then a minute later, a man sitting across the table from me says the same thing, and suddenly it's a good idea,
Oh,
right?
man.
So, what do? I do this and say, "Oh, I'm not saying anything here anymore because obviously my words aren't valued."
Yeah,
So, you know, it can happen in the workplace too.
yeah,
Just, um, understanding that, you know, again, as a leader or a teacher, or an athletic coach. I mean, I've talked a lot to coaches, and they've used this model too, and understood how, you know, if they belittle somebody who makes a mistake in a game, how that really affects that child's mental
oh,
capacity
huge,
to, you
huge.
know, and it makes them afraid to take risks and makes it doesn't improve their game necessarily. So,
Absolutely.
um, I even had a medical doctor, um, ask me to do a workshop with the doctors in his practice to tell them that they should treat the residents, in a better way. That,
Yeah,
you know, when they're practicing surgery, don't yell at them because that's not a good way to train a doctor is
yeah,
by yelling at them while they're in the middle of surgery. So, um, you know, it's everywhere, and again, I think the awareness that we're talking about here, you know, I salute you for bringing this to the forefront, because I think it's important. It's something that, um, if we know, again, that words matter and that how we treat other people matter, and especially people who we are leading, whether it's in a classroom or in the workplace, um, leadership is critical. And knowing the principles of leadership that produce people who are going to be empowered
yeah,
is critical.
yeah. And the courage that it takes to say, "I'll lead." You know, one of the things that I love about the martial art practice of Aikido is you take on 2 roles. You're either the leader or the follower. And both are empowering positions. And when you know what role you're going to play, it's easy to make space for somebody else to lead. It's not your job. Your job is to just follow and to just listen and participate in that way, to engage in that way. And I find that to be a really healthy tool as well in a relationship, to not become overpowering or always have it your way. And there's something wonderful about letting somebody else lead the child. Well, okay, you start today. What should we learn today? It's like, whoa, you know, giving someone the opportunity to take charge can change their whole world.
I've seen so many instances of teachers who will do that, and And when they do, yes, I mean, the culture of the classroom, it's palpable, how really good the kids feel when they are empowered, and again, they know that the teacher wants to know, who they are and what they're thinking. So, yeah, whether it's the classroom, the workplace, those relationships really work.
It's
And
what
I know that you're, kind of coming back to movement and the work you do. I just have to say that within the teaching repertoire that we try to promote, just the importance of that, how your body and your mind, and now we're finding the heart, and we're talking a lot about
right.
emotions. There's really a new area that it's in my newest book of heart brain coherence,
Yeah.
and the idea that there's neurons that go from the heart to the brain. In fact, more than the other way around. Um, so, so it's really mind, brain, and heart, all three together that really make us who we are.
Yeah. And that's that engagement. Children are naturally loving. Their heart is naturally out, and open until they get that, right? Till they get slapped down or forgot what your words were, toned down, brought down. Um, but their initial engagement as life is to reach out, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to connect,
To connect.
and self-soothe, right? When they need. And then there's a process of developing, growing up, where the ability to self-soothe sometimes is lost, and the natural reaction to, "Hey, I thought this," or to reach out, wanna connect, is so guarded with fear.
Yeah.
And, I'm hoping that, uh, the framework for joyful learning and leading can really become something for everybody to think about, that, even within my family, there are times when I'm leading. In my profession, there are times, when I'm leading, and the importance of joy and the importance of having that connection. And I could tell you, after 40 years of doing what I've been doing, I've made a lot of mistakes. And uh, uh, um, I would say most of the trauma that someone would say they experienced under my watch has completely come from, not from "I'm gonna do this," but really from that lack of awareness, of a gesture, a facial expression, how close I stand to somebody, and most important, are they ready to hear the truth? Because not everybody is when they're not in the right environment and the right climate. And that is a level of sensitivity and skill that I don't know that I'll ever master, but I've learned a lot about it in, uh, you know, realizing I told somebody that, they needed to practice keeping their heel up when they step back and they're devastated. And my intention is, I don't want you to hurt your back. I don't want you to get a plantar fasciitis, right? All good intention. But when is the right time? Timing is everything, as we know.
Well, none of us are perfect, but you just described um, being a self-aware learner, right? That when you're aware of yourself and when you see that you may be better off doing something differently, you adjust.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
So, and I say that to teachers, when you're not perfect and you may have times when you're not in a good mood and you're kinda downshifting your kids. But, be aware of that, have your own self-awareness so that you can repair that, whatever it takes to repair it. But yeah,
And
self-awareness is important.
sometimes you can't. It takes 2 people to wanna come together to repair something in that conversation, and, if sometimes it can't, but you can repair, in a sense, your heart. You can repair, your actions so that next time the actions are different,
Yeah.
and, that's what hopefully that's what it's all about. I don't think we ever stop learning. I think the best teachers are the ones that are excited to learn, that every opportunity to have somebody give you, as a teacher, their time, their consciousness, their attention, that's a lot. And I think, there have been times in my life where I really haven't valued. My anatomy teacher says, "The donor. Always value the donor. They're donating their time, their energy, their attention," which helps me as an educator grow and learn and lead, hopefully just a little bit better if I've got that awareness turned on.
Lead with heart and by heart, right?
Yeah.
You know, I started out, I gave a presentation in April at the Learning in the Brain conference, and I introduced the idea of heart brain coherence. And I said to them, think about this a minute. Think about being in grade school. So, years ago, for some of us, many years ago, when you learn something, let's say it's a poem, you might say, oh, I know that poem. I learned it by, and what word do you use? And they all said, "Oh, you learned it by heart." I'm like, "Ah,
Yeah, right.
we used that language
Yeah,
before we even knew that the heart had anything to do with actually cognition and
yeah.
learning." And, now we know, but wow, where did that expression come? We don't say, "I learned it by brain," or "I learned it by mind." We say, "I learned it by heart."
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the heart has a lot to do with learning and, compassion.
Well, thank you so much. And where can people get your book? Where can they find it?
Yeah. So the book is published by Corwin,
Okay.
Corwin, Corwin. And so you could go to corwin.com
Okay.
and look it up. I understand it's also on Amazon or will be on Amazon. I was talking to someone in Thailand yesterday and she got it on her Kindle.
Yeah, I love it.
So, um, yeah, so it's available through the publisher, through Amazon. You can also go to my website and um, it's www.braintargetedteaching.org. So it's all one word, braintargetedteaching.org.
Excellent.
And on the website, there are lots of examples of learning units where teachers have used the brain targeted teaching model to teach a variety of content areas. There's lots and lots of lessons that teachers have used on there. We call them learning units, where they take each brain target and they show how they implemented a lesson in geography or a lesson in math or a lesson in
Oh, that's
language.
wonderful.
Yeah, so there's a lot of examples there. I also recently put up a chapter from my book on research on the model itself. So the brain targeted teaching model is based on research from the neuro and cognitive sciences, from the learning sciences. But now the model itself, we have a chapter where the model itself has been used as an intervention in research. And so there are about 20 studies over about 10 different countries where
Fantastic.
the model was used. Some of the people in that have been in my courses at Hopkins because they were online, but others just found the model and used it as an intervention. Some of it is with professional development, and some of it is actually using it with students in a randomized control trial where there's a pre-test, post-test, and a control group. And the brain targeted teaching model was shown to be effective, be more effective than a traditional model. So that's on the website as well. And I'll be putting up other gems there too. So,
Awesome.
um,
All right, so we're talking about the brain targeted teaching model, a framework for joyful learning and leading. I can't wait to get it because I have the original here and I want to get my hands on all the new information. Thank you so much, Marielle.
thank you,
It's
Debbie.
been a
It's been
joy, and I'm just really appreciative that you have taken the inspiration to create change in the world and continue to upgrade it, not get stuck in I read the book, it's all done, but continuing to evolve and transform. That's what the world needs right now. Good role models and things that what? Target our brain, our heart, and our whole
in
being,
our bodies.
our bodies. All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening to Get In. And don't forget to pick up that book. I think whether you are working in a professional environment or a leader in your home or a teacher, I think you'll find lots and lots of good information. And you can find me at debbierosas.com. That's where I share all of my writing on body and life, fitness, health, and well-being. Holistic fitness, at least 2 articles a week come out, and it's free. Just sign up for a subscription, and you can also go to niaondemand.com and experience 2 weeks free of Nia movement. There are movement experiences for 5 minutes up to a whole hour, meditations as well. And the podcasts are there so that you can watch them. And all the podcasts are also on just all the listening devices. You can also find a little bit more about Nia at Nia Technique. And I look forward to chatting with you next time and getting into conversations about the body and life. Thanks so much for joining me.